Hi everyone, welcome back to the Property Finance Podcast, and today we're carrying on our series of FAQs, and this one's kind of covering off not necessarily a frequently asked question, but more of something that I see a lot of on social media, which is, what are the risks of going to auction? And there seems to be a real push at the minute to kind of push people to getting into purchasing at auctions, and I think there just needs to be a bit of guidance there just around what the risks are, because the problem you have with auctions, and this is what we found quite a bit recently, is people will go to auction, they'll be successful, they'll go and put their 10% deposit down, and then they'll come to me and say, oh, can I raise finance on this purchase? There'll then be all manner of different things that will come out the woodwork on said purchase, and all of a sudden you're fighting against a 28-day deadline on a property that just can never complete in 28 days. So a few of the things that I would do if I was purchasing at auction is, first off, make sure you've got that 10% deposit. I think a lot of people forget that when they're buying at auction, the minute that hammer goes down, you've got to pay that 10%. And it's not a case of you've got a couple of days to pay. You have to pay it there and then. So having that 10% is an absolute must. The second thing I would do is get a good solicitor to look through the legal pack. So you need to have a good solicitor on board, a solicitor who can move quickly and who is willing to look through a legal pack for you for not a stupid amount of cost either. I think you want to be paying maybe £250, £500 for them to look through that legal pack for you. I mean, most are going to charge probably closer to the £250, I would think. Get them to have a look through the legal pack, make sure they check the title, make sure that there's nothing horrendous on the title, and make sure that when they go through, there's no dodgy rights of access or anything like that, or any bizarre covenants. So they'll be able to check that relatively quickly without going through kind of a major legal process. The other one I would do is, obviously there's normally set days to go and look around the property as part of the auction. So there'll be certain days where you can go do viewings. Take a builder. Because again, you're not going to have time to do structural surveys, etc. You need a builder who is good, who is going to be able to wander around and say pretty quickly, right, that's a problem, that isn't a problem, and be able to identify those pretty quickly with minimal cost and effort. So they're the two things that I would do without a shadow of a doubt before you even get into the auction room. Then the other thing I would do is take emotion out of it. A lot of people get drawn into the emotion of an auction, start overbidding, start overpaying. Take emotion out of it. Set yourself a firm limit and say, right, I cannot go over that number. The last thing I would do before you get into that auction room is I would speak to a broker, obviously come and have a conversation, and I would get a set of AIPs before you even get into the room, because one of the things that lenders do, especially on bridging finance, is they will do some initial due diligence on that property and be able to come up with any issues that they foresee before you even get into the auction room. So go for an AIP, get that agreement in principle in place, and have an idea of, right, okay, if I go up to this limit, I should have finance available based on the agreement in principle that I've got. Obviously, keep in mind, if you go over that number, there is a risk that you may not have finance available up to that figure. So keep in mind that if you go over that figure that you've set yourself, you may have to increase the deposit that you put into the property. But having that agreement in principle in place means that likely the lender's done some initial due diligence, they've had a look at the property, they've had a look at comparables, they've had a look at the auction listing, possibly had a look at the legal pack, and they haven't seen anything that's kind of initially jumped out at them as being an issue. So it's a way of getting someone else to do another sense check for you as well. So they're all the things I would do before I even got into the auction room. Obviously, when you're in there, set yourself that limit. Don't exceed that limit unless you really can sort of afford to. But once you've done it, once you're successful at auction, pay that 10%. And then obviously just keep in mind you have got that set 28 days to complete. And obviously if you don't, you're then potentially at risk of losing the 10% deposit that you've put down, as well as potentially being sued for non-completion of contract as well. So there are a lot of risks when it comes to auction finance, but if it's done in the right way, it can be a great way of picking up some great deals. So don't be put off of auctions. Just make sure that you do everything that you should do to set the correct foundations in place, so that when you're in the room, you can have that confidence that you can actually deliver on what you're bidding on, and don't just go and bid on something and then speak to a broker the day after you've completed on it, because it just is not a sensible way of doing it, and it will induce way more stress into your life than you need to. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully it gives you some confidence and some ideas as to what to do before you go for an auction. And hopefully you found that really helpful. Thank you very much for listening. Catch you on the next one.